everybody. Welcome to this edition of Stream On. I'm Jim Williams, your host. Now, we have a special show for you today. Going to have a lot of fun. And it's because of the hit comedy on BBC and here in the U.S. now, streaming on BritBox, Mrs. Brown's Boys. Now, to say that Mrs. Brown's Boys is a different type of sitcom is like saying President Donald Trump could teach a class in humility, okay? So we're talking about a little bit of an understatement. It is different. It's different in all the right ways. It is absolutely a slap you in the face type comedy that demands your attention. And trust me, my friends, when I tell you, it's well worth getting slapped in the face for. You know, think about, hey, Mrs. Doubtfire meets Archie Bunker. I know it sounds like a strange mashup, but trust me when I tell you, Mrs. Brown's Boys works. Now, the driving forces behind Mrs. Brown are my guests today. And that, of course, is Brendan O'Carroll, who plays the title role of the outspoken Mrs. Agnes Brown, and his charming and talented wife, Jennifer Gibney, who plays his daughter, Cathy Brown, on the show. Okay, they're going to explain it to you. Ride with us, folks. Take this ride, because I got to tell you, Brendan and Jennifer, it's a joy to have you. It's even more fun to talk to you about Mrs. Brown's Boys. It's an ensemble cast, most all of which are your family. Is it that tough to do a show about Mrs. Brown's Boys with all your family?
Well, on the family end of things, it's we're not the Waltons for starts. You know, we can go to war, but it never comes on stage and it never comes on TV. But you know, I'm a firm believer in nepotism. Get them in, and make them work. But as a family, I think that actually lends itself to the series. Jenny would probably have a better opinion on that. I think because we're family, it comes across as more of a family.
Right.
Yeah, because we have a shorthand between us, as every family do, you know. So that comes in handy especially when he goes off script.
Yeah. It's I was recently, about when we first started getting Mrs. Brown's Boys here. I was on a local, a radio show, a national radio show. They were asking me for, binge something to watch different. I said, we got to watch Mrs. Brown's Boys. And they said, well, describe it for me. And I said,
good luck with that.
All right. I said, all right. And I hope that please do not take this in any other way but a compliment. I said, think of Robin Williams as Mrs. Doubtfire. Think of Mrs. Doubtfire with a family, and there you go.
I take that as a compliment.
So I figured, channeling my best Robin Williams in Mrs. Doubtfire, that gives you an idea of what Mrs. Brown is all about. And, I got a lot of feedback from that of people saying, thank God you turned me on to this show. And here in the United States, you become, it's not even a cult thing. It's a mainstream thing. Everybody loves Mrs. Brown's Boys.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much.
One of the things, Jenny, that you had talked about a second ago was that you guys have got a shorthand there. There's a lot of things in Mrs. Brown's Boys that I think everybody's family can identify with.
Oh, definitely. Well, that's we often talk about it that at, family occasions like Christmas or whatever, everybody thinks it's just their family that behaves like that. And you realize when you watch Mrs. Brown's Boys, no, we're all the same. We all behave like that when we get together.
And one of the beauties of the thing, too, is the comedic talent is fun. The cast is again, it's great that it's a family situation, but the cast is brilliant. I mean, again, it's almost like you're talking about the shorthand. There's just some of the looks, sometimes in comedy, you don't have to say a word if you give the right look.
Yeah.
And there's some looks between you and Mrs. Brown that, you look at it and you're like, you can just fall out laughing and you don't say a word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I borrowed that look from my mother, who was able to look at me and drive 6-inch nails through the back of my neck without even moving.
I think we've all looked at our mothers in that same way. Where it's like, say one more word and you're a dead man. You know, it's like, okay, not going to happen. So, have you been surprised at all about the success on BritBox of Mrs. Brown's Boys?
Yeah. Listen, it caught us completely by surprise. If you look at when we did the very first series, when the first episode was going out, I didn't really understand audience figures, audience appreciation, numbers, etc. And I asked the producer, I said, the first episode's going out on Wednesday. What should we be looking for? And he said, well, this is the way it works with a sitcom. He said, you'll open up to about 2.5 million viewers, and then it will go down to around 1.5. And the trick is to get it back up to 2.5 by the end of the series, and then you've got a second series. And I said, oh, okay. So when our first episode went to 8 million, he was shocked. We were shocked. The BBC were shocked. We were all shocked. So yeah, it did catch us by surprise, to be honest with you.
Well, I think one of the great things about being on in the U.S. here on BritBox is that you're also getting an international audience that helps prop up the reason for going into more and more series is because you've expanded an audience, and you've got now not just a good following in the UK and obviously in Ireland, but here in the US now.
Well, and remember this. I mean, I know people downplay it a bit because people always think, American comedy is different. Nobody appreciates comedy more than Americans. No film industry in the world makes more comedy than American film industry. And Americans love comedy, and they're very good judge of comedy. And my feeling is very much, look, if it doesn't work in America, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Recently I talked to Martin Clumes. We've spoken 3 or 4 times. And to your point, I said to him, look, the success of Doc Martin is that people get humor. There's humor there. You don't have to smack somebody in the face to get it. It's there.
No, and they get the nuance. They get the nuance of it. And particularly with somebody like Martin, like Martin Clune just has funny bones. You put him in a panel show, he's funny. You put him in anywhere, he's funny.
Mm-hmm. But in your case, all right, the great thing about Mrs. Brown's Boys is, in some way, if you look at the set, if you look at how you do it, and you guys are so good at this, there's a little bit of an Archie Bunker situation going there. There's a little bit. Yeah. There's a mash of a number of different shows that have roots in the UK, but also is very translatable to what goes on in the US.
And there's a little sitting on the edge of your seat sometimes going, anything could possibly come out of her mouth right now.
Oh yeah.
And what kind of puts you relaxes you a little bit is that you go, and she doesn't care.
There's no filter on Mrs. Brown.
No.
None whatsoever.
Which probably has driven people in the censor department crazy, but no, it literally it's such a treat because it's sometimes in this world, especially living close here to Washington D.C., you just need escape. Give me a half an hour, I can just sit back and laugh. And Mrs. Brown's Boys gives you that half hour.
Well, you've hit it right on the nail because we toured the live show, and we'll be touring in the United States in 2021 with the live show. And I have always said in every interview, here's the deal I make with the audience: come in, sit in the dark for 2 hours, and we will make you cry laughing. No other deal. We won't educate you. We won't change your politics. We won't change your religion. But you will sit in the dark for 2 hours and you will laugh.
And I guarantee you, it's you do that on a consistent basis, which is not an easy thing to do. And,
thank you so much.
It's so much fun to watch the show. It's so much fun to see how each one of those wonderful characters interface with you. And
thank you, Jim. Thank you very much.
It's such a treat. Growing up, who were some of you? Did you have any? Both of you, did you have any favorite shows and people who, in one way or another, influenced you as getting into business?
On the British end, it was things like Are You Being Served and Morecambe and Wise, which were huge heroes. And then on the American side, it was Mary Tyler Moore and Lou Grant.
Okay.
They were my favorites.
Don't forget Rhoda.
Right, Rhoda. Yeah, of course. And that whole group from the MTM group.
Yeah. And they relocated to Ireland, MTM Studios.
Yeah. I've over the years I had the opportunity to meet a number of the folks who were part of that team. And
well, you're very lucky.
They were, they had a very good. They produced Bob Newhart. They produced a number of great situation comedies that came out of that shop.
Anybody who hasn't seen Bob Newhart stand up just hasn't lived.
Just talking to a phone.
And the submarine, the guy hanging out of the store with one arm, right. The driving instructor. Every one of them made me cry.
Well, let's talk about, because I know we're coming up to the end here and I don't want to get anybody in trouble. So let's talk about, we got BritBox and everybody's going to be watching. What are some of the things that we can be looking forward to as we continue to grow with Mrs. Brown's Boys?
Yeah, if you look at, take for instance Mrs. Brown's grandson, who is played by Jamie, who really is her grandson. He made his debut on the show when he was 4 years of age, and this Christmas we celebrated his 13th birthday. So he's now an old hand, 9 years doing the show.
It's amazing. That's amazing.
And the conversations, of course, are different, now because. His father, his dad tried to have the talk with him in the show. His dad tried to have the talk with him and said, "Look, son, we need to talk about sex." And his answer was, "Sure, Dad. What do you want to know?" Which is very Mrs. Brown.
Very Mrs. Brown. Well, look, I thank you both for taking the time.
Jim.
It's been a total treat. Promise
Thank
me
you very
that
much.
when you come to the U.S. or whenever you want to promote something about BritBox, that you'll come back and do it again.
You got it, Jim. Thank you very much.
We will.
Gentlemen.
Special thanks to our guests, Brendan O'Carroll and his wife, Jennifer Gibney, the driving forces behind the successful BBC and BritBox comedy, Mrs. Brown's Boys. Okay? Check them out on BritBox. We highly recommend. And we'll be right back with more Stream On right after this word from BMW i3, the ultimate electric driving machine.
Life is about making decisions. At BMW i, we decided it was time to reinvent the car from the ground up, making sure we were open for truly innovative ideas. We decided that the car we wanted must be electric, and it should be made of extremely light and super strong carbon fiber. And finally, we decided to make it more intelligent and added our promise of incomparable driving pleasure. We made all these decisions to offer you a choice. The all-electric BMW i3.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, if you're not one of the over 50,000 people who've taken the time to subscribe to the podcast, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, we simply make it easy. All you have to do is go to the Apple Podcast Store, because that's where we are. We're part of the Apple Podcast family. Same thing goes for Google. So if you hit the old Google Play Store, go to Google Podcasts, we're there. You can find us on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, as well as TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, YouTube, to name a few. Now, for some reason, you cannot seem to find us. All you got to do is pull out the old Google machine and type in Stream On with Jim Williams. Hit the favorite button or the subscribe button. Each week you'll get a brand new edition of the show sent directly to your phone, your tablet, or to both. Okay? We certainly do try to make it simple. By the way, special thanks to our guests today. And those are the driving forces behind the outrageous and funny hit series on the BBC and Britbox, Mrs. Brown's Boys. And of course, we're talking about our guests today, Brendan O'Carroll and of course, Jennifer Gibney. All right. Be sure to check them out on Britbox. All the information on Mrs. Brown's Boys is below in our show box. Okay. All right. So what's happening next week? Well, next week, we're going to take a look at a very gritty, intense psychodrama called Blood. And that's going to be a lot of fun. We've got the cast and some of the creative team behind the outstanding show Blood. It's coming up for you next week. All right? Okay. Until that time, I'm Jim Williams for the team here at Stream On. We wish you a very safe and happy weekend. We'll catch you next week right here on Stream On when we talk Blood.